play it too. And see.
All right, so what can I do for you two today?
So we're hoping to learn a little bit more about the SimplyAnalytics new data set that you have. And
all right.
kind of, yeah, just kind of how I played around with it a little bit to try to understand like the mapping function. But there's some data in there about beer and wine consumption specifically that we've been doing some research on, and maybe some other kind of tourism hospitality related stuff that we might be able to use.
Okay. And you're also interested in the local data, right? The Nielsen Scarborough hyperlocal data, they call it.
I think, sure. Sounds right.
Which is new for us this semester. Okay. Are you looking for kind of a show and tell or demo, or did you want to have more of a discussion of the data points? And
well, maybe we could go into that after, but I think a show and tell just even how to pull the data.
Okay. Okay.
Well, yeah, I got
all right.
So.
Okay. Well, let me share screen then, but I will ask you to jump in whenever there's a need to redirect or slow down or speed up or look at some other aspect of it. So, all right. And as you know, you don't have to create an account, but you should, because it saves your searches, your favorites, locations, your favorite data points, your projects, as they call it. So I think I'm ready to go already. We do have, unfortunately now with the new package, concurrent user limits of 3 on campus, which is really limiting. It used to be 20. So for example, Eric, I've asked all this week to have up to like, I think 20 seats for as a temporary thing, like for your class tomorrow. But in other classes, I have my own class actually is using this week, my own research class. So whenever you guys have a class, I don't have to be involved. I'm happy to be involved, as you know. But you want students to use, a lot of students to use SimplyAnalytics in 1 week, or everyone be in it in your class period. Let me know, or just go into support and fill out a help request, and then contact, and then guy answering this is a nice guy, a friend of mine named Juan Vasquez. He lives in Dallas. You can say, hey, Juan, can we have 20 seats because I have a class today or tomorrow? So bear that in mind. Before, with 20 user limits, it had to be a big class for this to be a problem, but now it's almost every class. So just bear that in mind. Right. And as you may know, when you come in and you logged in as yourself, it puts you back where you were. So this is just some random table I was using for a video or something last week or a month ago. I don't remember why. Kind of random stuff here. Keyword searching or browsing, you know that the categories are here. Or sometimes I go into the data folders. And for example, the local data, the hyperlocal data is the Nielsen Scarborough Local Insights. Expenditures, you mentioned beer data, Chantel. I know you guys work on do a lot of publishing and consulting for that. That's under consumer expenditure estimates, the micro data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey, the CEX, with some massaging to make it down to block group level of geography. So sometimes I like looking at the data folder. Most students, I don't say to do that. They don't know what these things are. I barely know what some of them are. But as a more experienced user, and you guys too, just being smart researchers, you might have value in browsing this way as well. Okay, or keyword searching, for example, the local data. Just type in Greensboro, hit search. And in the filtering column, can you see the details okay? Is this large enough on your screens? Okay.
Yeah.
At the bottom, it shows you what data sets have data for this keyword, and there's only one here. It's the Scarborough Local Insight. So this is the hyperlocal data, they call it. You can see that in the fine print here, the metadata number and percentage of hyperlocal data compared to the national data that's also in the Scarborough survey. But these are the questions that specifically are limited to the triad, but also it might have some data from Charlotte and Raleigh, because they're also asking people, I think in those cities, metro areas, you also fly out of the GSO airport. So you may see some other cities a little bit, but largely this should all be Greensboro specific data. And you can see, Burlington Royal baseball game and so on. As you know, that's example of the kind of hyper local data that's in here. Otherwise, to focus on this data set, I would go back to data folder, Scarborough Local Insights, open up hyperlocal data. You get all the metros they cover with their localized survey questions. It takes a few seconds for it to open up now. I don't know why. It's annoying. But in a minute, we'll have a list of all the cities they cover. Hopefully I'm stalling here. Can you tell? Doesn't usually take this long. There we go. Sorry. Alphabetical order by city, and then Gainsborough's here too. But these are in clusters of topics, and that's maybe useful if you want to like focus in on like what do they ask about beer and drinking or tourism and travel. You can then itemize that and break it out and see what they have. So that's plan B. And you can still filter this stuff too. Once you pick on a folder here, I mean, it's not that much here, only 4, but I could at some point, type in Citgo and filter down. So you can filter the folder views as well as just doing a keyword search and filtering the entirety of your hits there. All right, let me pause. Questions so far? Pacing okay? Is this too basic or
No,
just right?
Yeah, this is good.
Okay. And likewise, in terms of just exploring consumer expenditure estimates, we talked about this a little bit already. I usually keyword search this because there's hundreds of product and service categories for this microdata, unpublished, CEX data, but you certainly can focus on topics including alcoholic beverages. And as you know from your research, there's data for consuming at home and data for consuming away from home. So hospitality is in this grouping, and the other groups more grocery stores and other retail outlets to purchase prepackaged beer and wine and spirits. And typically you have average household spending, and that's usually a pretty small number, right? Because a lot of households spend 0. So that always brings down the average, the median. But you also can get total spending, and that's useful, but only as if you're looking at places with equal population sizes. If we look at just total spending on beer, well, then it's always going to be Wake County and Mecklenburg is number 1 and number 2 because they have the most people, right? And they have, overall pretty healthy total income compared to some more rural parts of the state. But if you do compare like places, which I guess largely would be census tracts and block groups, because those are defined to be 4,000 person neighborhoods, census tracts, and block groups 2,000 person neighborhoods, then it's pretty comparable by population size, and then you can use that as a comparison tool if you are comparing places. Maybe you're not. Maybe you just want to know total spending on beer and ale in Rockingham County, which case clicking on beer, not at employer. Interesting that you would drink beer at your place of work. I guess we do that sometimes, right? But then you could get the total number for that city or that place, and that's fine. Okay, so that's the consumer expenditures. The other psychographic section or data sets, and that seems to be where your main interest is the very large Simmons local, which we've had for a while. We paid for this extra before NC Live stopped paying for SimplyAnalytics, and we had to pick it up all on our own end, which is why I took the time to kind of reshuffle our package in January when we started off with our new subscription. And this is all national data, so nothing specific to Greensboro, but this is a massive data set from their the Simmons National Consumer Survey. Yeah. And so that's one we've had for a while. And there are thousands of questions asked, and therefore many thousands of data points here, either as usually percentage of interest or number of persons, not spending levels. That's just not something they asked about. Yeah. So paired off numbers versus percentage data. Brand names, product categories, service categories. It's a really interesting mix. How are we doing?
Good. I do have.
Yeah, please jump in.
The local insights one, can you filter by demographic information for that?
All right, great question. I didn't take you very long to ask that question, Chantal. You can filter different demographic characteristics, yes. So it's not cross-typulation, it's simply filtering. So if you want a above average youth, does that make sense? If you want a place with a higher percentage than normal of younger adults, or an older place than normal, or a wealthier neighborhood or a poorer neighborhood, you can do some additional demographic data to filter it and then weed out, crosshatch out the places that don't meet your combined search. You want to see an example of that? Does that make sense? And you guys should know, and you probably already know, I'm not a demographer, I'm not a statistician, so I know how to use the product, and I'm pretty good, I think. Eric can back me up on this or not, at helping people think about how to make conclusions with the data they're getting. But still, I'm not, an expert in some of the finer points of how this data works because I'm not a statistician. Anyway, let me try finding an example. If my
follow up on the question. I see an export option. So can we get the data out of here and analyze
Oh yeah,
it?
definitely. Yeah, into Excel, sure. Yeah, you can get some pretty big tables out of this thing. Trying to find, sorry, I had some existing filters I'd already set up, and now I'll just try to make one from scratch. But I don't remember which project I have the filters in. So I'll just do it from scratch if that's okay with you. Let me just switch back to the map. Well, Chantel, any example? You want to try something and see if I can get it to work?
I guess we could.
Or just, it can be just very general, but.
Look at beer consumption by, I mean, do we have age as an option, or, I mean, what do we have?
All right, we could do beer consumption, either in a lot of different, beer variables out there, but then we could overlay an age range or like percentage of young persons. So we can't filter it to just questions asked of young adults. We can look at beer consumption and then try to get a sense of the demographics of age underlying that data. So does that make sense? So we're not looking at a subset of everyone who's asked this beer question. What was the answers if you were 30 and younger? That data is not in here, that kind of level of cross-tabulation. So we could see where are in what young person oriented places how much beer is being consumed.
Like around campus.
All right, sure. Well, that's okay. Well, let me show you what I'm talking about. Hopefully I'm making sense. Apologize if not. So first, let me turn off the highlight locations because they're so messy for cities. All right, let's just look at center of the city, including campus area. I'm redrawing the map here. Where are we? I'm lost, sorry. I think we're north of downtown and north of campus, right? Yeah, there we go. I could do a better search and actually just pull up campus. Yeah, here's campus right there. And black groups, we can see places better. All right, should I just do any one of the beer data points? Do you care?
I just want to see how it works, yeah.
Okay. And there are a lot of hits for beer. It's 2,400. How about just total spending?
Sure.
Okay. Turn off, I have Starbucks here for some reason. That's my old search. I want to do quantiles local just to get the biggest range of colors. So it's going to give us, I have block groups selected as the geography. If we have 50 block groups on screen, that means there'll be 10 of each color. That maximizes the differences. It helps us most visualize the changes there. And you can see campus is always sometimes problematic, given that it's group home populations, right? Not people living in normal housing and apartments. Sometimes the campus data is not very good. Just given, likewise with prisons, it's a weird comparison maybe, and nursing homes, group housing, it's sometimes kind of awkward to see what the data is versus the neighborhood, where you can see the value is $50,000. So that's one limitation we can't see. Although in theory, maybe most of the people on campus, students aren't supposed to be drinking anyway, right? Because they're too young, maybe, I don't know. We'll leave that aside, sorry. Okay, and I'm just noting in our map here, or our legend, that looks like 50,000, or maybe like, 54,000 might be right in the middle of the range there, with about half above, half below. Okay, so you kind of have to be aware of that. And then before we make the table, let's do age. How about just median age?
Yeah.
Which usually is underneath the date ranges. No. Sometimes I don't like that you get so many hits. I have to really hunt around to try to find. And actually, here, I'm making this too hard. Sometimes I don't like how many hits there are because I'm just medium age. Let me try this instead. Data category, age. Usually it's at the bottom. They have like median and mean. Sorry, I don't mean to be wasting your time like this.
No, you're fine.
And then of course they want to break it down by the genders. Come on. There we go. Okay, yeah, American Community Survey, that's good. And that's important too. And I've talked to Juan, the support person for this. Sometimes you have to pick related or the same data sets or the same years of coverage, and that's going to be hard here because we're combining microdata from the Bureau of Statistics CEX survey with the American Community Survey. So we'll see if this works. I'm not sure it's going to work. But anyway, key point here is you once again do median or local quantiles. And it looks like about 30 is average, 30 years old, pretty young city. Okay, so filtering, first off, I'm going to go into the little hourglass thing here, or the time indicator, and make my favorites for median. Actually, there's median age by sex. I already had that. So here's one of the spinning indicators. Make this favorites. Add the favorites. That means when I go back to filtering now, I should be able to find there's median age, for example. All right. So median age is greater than or less than maybe. Let's go up a little higher than 30. I mean, that's kind of pretty low. So that's like 40. Okay. And first off, what thing's going to do here is actually just going to apply this data point on top of beer. So actually this might be enough. Let's see. So if this works well, takes a few seconds for it to process. Any, in this case, block group, that's what we're mapping, that does not have an average median age of 40 or lower should be disappearing. And if that didn't happen, I need to readjust the numbers in the filter. Or just the filtering just didn't work. That's odd. I thought I'd pick this, sorry. Maybe I just didn't apply it. Yep, okay, that worked. All right, let me zoom out just a little bit more. Still census block groups. But what it should be showing is, in effect, what block groups in now Greater Greensboro, and I zoomed out so far, are younger than average for the city in this county, I guess, since I'm zoomed out so far. And on top, and the colors are still operating to show us spending on beer and ale at home, 2020, by those units. So again, it's not looking at a subset of the survey question by age. It's simply overlapping a more youthful area by this demographic point. So that is the best you can do to try to cross-tabulate, unless the cross-tabulation is built into the variable we're looking at. Does that make sense? Did I do a good job of that explanation?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So yeah, in terms of your empirical research you guys do, you'll have to discuss whether that's how useful that data is. It's not correlation, right? It's more coincidence. And well, I guess we don't know either one of those two things. Right. But it's simply two data points overlaid. It's not the same survey.
No, I get what you're saying. I just was gonna say, so that, and like we picked beer and ale 2020, and I think the age thing was from 2018, right? So if somebody moved, like. Yeah,
that was our community survey data from ACS 1-year estimate 2018. So we could, and I did that fairly quickly to try to show you an example. We could try to do better matching the 2 years together. That's certainly something we could try to do.
Well, I think one thing that might be interesting, at least for an Eric can pipe in, like at least for a research note or something, would be to compare the at-home beer, wine, or alcohol consumption between 2019 and say 2020, given the changes that happened last year. And that we might not necessarily need to drill down as much on demographic data, because we could just say, in future research, you should do that. But we could just say, we found this thing that's kind of, this is what's happening. We might be able to drill down by things like type of alcohol they're consuming or things like that might be more interesting. So I think there's some potential there.
I agree. But before you really get deep into research, though, we should contact the publisher and make sure that the data is reflecting the post-COVID, that the surveys do reflect post-COVID data. There's always a time lag, of course, with any data set. Yeah. And let's make sure that they did ask, the questions have been asked us, and then, it takes them some time to analyze it and process it. make sure that is indeed reflecting and not just an algorithmic projection of 2019 data into 2020. So
That would be helpful, yeah.
I don't know what the time delay is for the surveys being done and then the data to be analyzed and massaged to make it down to block group level. I mean, that you can look up, actually this might come up in my class tomorrow because we're talking about market research this month. The scheduling of both the diaries and the interviews that make up the consumer expenditure survey. And then eventually the macro data gets published and then the company grabs it, SimplyAnalytics grabs it and does their analysis to make it down to block group level, which is not in the macro data itself. So we could confirm that with some emails and some chats. But yeah, that's something that you could certainly consider doing, I would say.
Yeah, that was pretty much all I kind of wanted to say was like, what was the potential of the data for research? I can definitely see for like classroom applications for sure. Yeah.
Now, one thing to be aware of, and I'm sorry if I'm telling you stuff you already know as professional researchers, but whenever you look up American Computer Survey data in the census website, you get margins of error data, and there's always an assumption of like a 95% confidence interval. For this proprietary psychographic data, they never share that. They would never tell you the margin because they have competitors, Nielsen that's out there, and Simmons and MediaMark and others, and they're not that open about some of their margin of error among the other aspects of their analysis and their algorithms they use. So you wouldn't be able to cite margin of error data in your research unless somehow a very nice researcher at Nielsen Simmons is willing to share that with you. I don't know if that matters or not, but I assume the margin of error for a block group of 2,000 persons based upon a national survey of 3 million people, that's probably a pretty high margin of error. We're talking, double digits, if not 50% or something like that, maybe higher, I don't know. So, professional researcher, like you should like compared student use versus professional research. And that's an important point, of course. You might want to be aware of that for very small places, margin of error is probably pretty high. On the other hand, there's no way around that. No one else can do that and does this. It's not like there is anyone that publishes the margin of error for the proprietary data like this. So, you're kind of stuck with what data exists. The census is not, ask these questions about beer spending and compile it. Actually, they do. They help the Bureau of Statistics do that study, but they're not doing it at enough sample size to get block groups with any margin of error that's low. So we're just stuck with that. I don't think there's much we can do about that.
That would be I can do a quick Google Scholar search and just see if anybody published on this data too.
Yeah, that's great. Most of the customers are corporate, they're market research companies selling to corporations who want to do their analysis and they don't care about some of these details. As long as they trust the data and they know the competitors have the same data. So the data is not any better than what the competitors are getting, I assume. So, but you guys, you probably care about those things. What else? What is it worth looking at or talking about today at this point? Oh, I just stopped sharing and I just thought I want to show you something. You may already be aware of this, but it'll be quick. For any data point, once it's on screen or in the list of hits, whether you're browsing or keyword searching, you got the triple dots there. One of the menus is view metadata. So this will tell you exactly where the data comes from. And you can see that reference, as I talked about already, to the Bureau of Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey. But then SimplyAnalytics is doing some other high-level analysis using PUMS level data, public use microdata, PUMD, sometimes it's PUMS, to allow it to be mapped down to a block group level. So anyway, so just triple dots, right click, and you get the metadata and you can see exactly where the data is coming from.
Steve, can
Yes,
you
sir.
compare at-home consumption versus away from home consumption?
Yep, definitely. The basic survey instrument for the CEX does break down both for food and drink away from home and at home.
Okay.
And also types of wine varietals, whiskey versus bourbon versus beer, for example. And I've seen, it might be actually Simmons and not the CEX, but craft beer is also getting some coverage. I might need to search for ale instead of craft beer. So, craft beer can be any kind of beer. May not be a good choice. So you can break it down. Oop, we're getting an Indian nation Aluet. Huh. Well, I probably don't need to pursue too many. There's beer and ale together. But yeah, you can break down both ways, Eric. Sorry, quick answer to that question. And if you two need more expert consultations, I know the SimplyAnalytics people. One of the co-owners is Charles Schwartz. He's out in Colorado. He's a PhD, I think in statistics, and his brother co-owns it. He's the sales guy, Stephen, good friend of mine. And I mentioned Juan, who's more of a trainer than an expert statistician. But if you wanted me to hook you up with Charles, the statistician behind the product, I could probably try to do that as well. And they know me pretty well, and I've helped them make some sales. So there's a good chance they would give you some time, or at least respond to emails at the least, if you need to talk to people with higher levels of knowledge of how they're doing the data.
Bonnie would be excellent. Let me see this recording. I just volunteered. Okay. Okay, well, that gives me something to chew on at least and think about how we might use it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Really sure all what the underlying data was. So that was really particularly helpful.
Okay. Do you need me to send you any links for the CEX homepage? I mean, I know you guys can Google it real quick and find it too.
Oh, if you want to save the time and do that.
Yeah, I can do that real quick. I'll just send you the CEX because you can see the survey instrument there if you're curious. As well as this, I mean, you can find this quickly as I can, but I'm happy to do it. The Simmons, sorry, I'm getting my things confused. Simmons local and the Nielsen, making a note here, sorry. Nielsen Scarborough local data. Yeah. I'll send you the 3 home pages and you can see what else is there. Do you guys use the ACS? Are you familiar with that? The American Community Survey from the census?
I know.
Let me send that to you. I mean, that's a rabbit hole of content, but given that that's the demographic data, and they do have 2010 decennial census, but as you know, that data set's really small and it's just population data. ACS asks hundreds of questions, and that's really where we get demographic data from the census, as well as some behavioral things like internet consumption, for example. So I'll send you that link as well, just as one of the other data sets that drives the content we get in SimplyAnalytics. And just FYI, we have some one-time money to spend from last salaries that the provost wants us to spend out. And so we're looking at buying something called Nielsen Claritas through Data Planet. Data Planet's a new database we have. It has a mapping tool and I need to spend more time with it to see how useful it is and whether it's useful as is SimplyAnalytics for mapping. But it would be yet another data set, psychographic data, including PRISM profiling of consumers like Mosaic. I think I've used that before, Eric, and you alluded to it once or twice. Yeah. It's not something I put a lot of time into, but it's a useful concept for students to know. Anyway, if we do end up getting that, I will let you know, and you can look at that as well and see. It's yet another data set in our mix of possibilities.
Sounds good.
Really helpful. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. If there's more I can do, let me know, and I'll send you links to those 4 data sets. And I hope you have a good semester.
Appreciate it.
All right, goodbye.
Take care.